Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Modern Day Wizards, and I'm joined again by Leila's son to talk about something which she is an expert on, and that is Lyme disease. So, welcome to the show, Leila.
Thanks for having me, Cahlen.
So, I don't, I haven't had too much personal experience with Lyme. At least not as far as I know. I know I did grow up, and a family friend of mine got Lyme disease, and I think she was like paralyzed. She had to be in a wheelchair, but she kind of recovered. And my mother, she always had sort of health issues, so I've kind of wondered if maybe there was something similar going on because they both lived in the same area. But anyways, I also had a close friend who got it really bad, and I actually did a podcast with her a long time ago called I don't remember, something about Lyme disease. But anyways, I know that you focus on it, and I keep hearing people talking about it, and it's kind of, it has a resonant frequency with what's going on today. You know what's going on today. I know you want to post this maybe on YouTube, so I won't say what's going on today, but it's kind of a similar situation, and so yeah, I just want to kind of get like a complete download of your thoughts on Lyme disease, what it is, where it come from, and what to do about it. So, I guess we'll just start with what is it? What's Lyme disease?
Lyme disease is the bacteria that used to come from a tick, but now it can come from insects and all sorts of other venues that we don't want to get into. But it's a bacteria that essentially destroys your system, your
Wait,
organs.
are you saying it comes? So you said it comes from basically biting insects. I assume you mean biting insects, and then you implied something. Are you referring to a fluid substance which is pressed with high pressure through a narrow metal tube into someone's body?
No,
No?
I don't know that I'm going to go that far.
Okay. So
No.
what can you say what you were referring to there without saying what you don't want to say?
Oh, it's definitely it's a man-made pathogen
Hmm.
designed specifically to disrupt one's entire physical body, spiritual body, emotional and mental body. I believe that not only is it man-made it's a man-made bacterial pathogen. I also believe that there is a psychological component too that has been put in it
Mm.
to really wear people down psychologically and spiritually as well as physically.
Okay, so if someone maybe isn't feeling very well and they're wondering, maybe I have Lyme, like what are some key things that they would notice if they had Lyme?
Well, one of the first misconceptions I would say is that everybody thinks that they're going to get a bullseye rash. And actually, I think it was Dr. Jernigan actually said that a very small percentage of people actually show up with the bullseye rash. So just because you don't get a bullseye rash doesn't mean that you don't indeed have Lyme.
Okay.
What was the
And
rest
then,
of the question?
so just what would be the symptoms then? Like what would they notice?
The symptoms would be fever, sweating, severe fatigue, migraines, exhaustion, lots of pain and inflammation. The bacteria goes to the weakest area of the body. So if it's joints and your family has a history of joint issues, then it tends to go to the joints. If your weakest organ, it tends to cause heart issues, just pain, inflammation, chronic fatigue. And we're going way above regular chronic fatigue. This kind of fatigue is debilitating fatigue where you just can't function and it doesn't matter how much you sleep kind of fatigue.
Hmm.
And so if you take all sorts of herbs and none of them are working, and even if you take some antibiotics here and there that don't work, you could still probably have Lyme. So Dr. Klinghardt will say that he has found that every single autoimmune and chronic degenerative disease has underpinnings of Lyme disease.
Hmm. Interesting. I also heard Dave Asprey say that in every single situation where he saw Lyme, that it was also kind of coincided with toxic mold, like
Absolutely.
mold in the environment.
Yeah. And, when I got diagnosed with Lyme, which was probably 10 years ago, after probably having it most of my life, they hadn't made that connection yet. So the whole mycotoxin illness connection to mold is just now in the last 3 to 5 years really coming into the forefront. And as I look back, we had rebuilt a basement, and I remember distinctly smelling mold down there as a child growing up. I also think there's a huge component tying into cavitations, which is infection in the bone that comes from pulling out the wisdom teeth without taking out the ligament as well. And what happens is when you don't have that taken care of properly, when you extract the tooth, it acts like a wick for bacteria, and the bacteria actually goes into the jawbone and causes an invisible infection. And I think there's a lot of undiagnosed dental issues that go hand in hand with Lyme, as well as mold. And those two are definitely precursors that absolutely shut down the immune system and keep it from functioning fully, allowing the pathogen to really take hold. That pathogen is really quite parasitic and loves to take host into anyone whose body is weakened enough, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well.
So it sounds like, and this is kind of a similar thing that we're seeing with in the virus situation, just people, these things can do horrible things to your body, but that they're only able to do horrible things in their body if they're able to identify and take advantage of a weakness, and then, it might even chain from there. Like you might have a infection in your jaw, which it goes on, and that weakens you overall, and that makes several other points of your body, like your, maybe your knee or whatever, and seems like it can just kind of take get a foothold and then keep taking steps to keep knocking you down. But if you're able to maintain a certain level of health, then you wouldn't even have to worry about that. Is this right?
Yes, absolutely. So all disease, from what I've been taught, comes down to, on the physical level, staying on top of any sort of virus, bacteria, yeast, fungus, mold, parasites, and heavy metals. So, and those are all really invisible things. If you have a heavy metal issue, or if you have a viral issue, almost everybody with Lyme has got Epstein-Barr virus, which doesn't really manifest or show. It lies latent or is just a low-grade virus for years and years and years. So these things are all very tricky. What I'm trying to say is a lot of people can present as being healthy from the outside, but we don't really know what's going on until they get hit with a virus or Lyme bacteria.
So
Invisible.
if it comes down to just, in order to at least avoid it, not becoming susceptible, because it sounds like we really have a lot of these various diseases, in quotes, in our bodies already. Like I would bet probably most people have, Lyme disease, because it's also, I understand it's also contagious through like sexual relationships and stuff like that. So it's like we have these things, and if we stay healthy, then they will not be able to get a foothold. So it seems like there's kind of a general grouping of things to do to focus on maintaining your health. Does that mean that pretty much fixing Lyme disease, once you've gotten it and it's having a negative impact on you, that healing it is pretty much just getting healthy again, or does it have specific things that you need to do?
There's probably a lot of questions in there that I could run with, and I'm not sure exactly where to start. I think overall, to be healthy, a lot of people just think it's working out and eating right, which is very broad for a lot of people. I think our society as a whole is already very unhealthy, and that you have to be a very savvy individual to understand how to test for viruses or bacteria, or how to check on your heavy metal load, or how to check on your parasitic load. And when you have gone through Lyme disease and you've healed it, you've had to learn how to do all of those things. If you stay in the system and you only go allopathic, you'll never get to the bottom of that, and you'll never heal. That said, Lyme is a complex, insidious disease. The longer you have it, the harder it is to heal. What it does is it really compromises your methylation pathways. Your ability to detox just isn't there the longer you have it. And the longer you have it, the more of a toxic overload you have from endo and exotoxins, from pathogens and from heavy metals and from parasites. So the more blocked up you are, even when you go to take an antibiotic or an antibacterial herbal treatment, it can be hard on the system because it dumps even more in. And I'm sorry,
So it does sound like, there is an advantage. Basically, I think my question is there an advantage to knowing that you have Lyme so that you can do things a little differently, or should you just focus on health? And it sounds like you're saying, well, knowing that you have Lyme, will impact whether you need to take antibiotics, and also recognizing that if you do take antibiotics, that the die-off of all of these Lyme bacteria and also all the other things that are dying as a result of you taking antibiotics may be something that you need to keep an eye on.
you have to know that you have Lyme, or else you just don't know what you're dealing with and what you're working with.
Okay.
Like I said, Lyme is dental infection, mold exposure, long-term viruses, not only Epstein-Barr, but several others, and heavy metal toxicity. So if you don't know those pieces, which, a Lyme literate doctor will, if you go to a regular GP, they're not going to have a clue as to how to even begin to work on those different levels. And you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And even with Lyme literate doctors, there's varying degrees of competence within those physicians as well, and how much they can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a common story I hear is people jumping between doctors.
Yeah. And that's the beginning part of the journey. It's complex and it takes time, and each practitioner is a piece to the puzzle of your personal puzzle, and getting to the bottom of it. And it is an arduous hella journey, let me tell you.
What was your experience? Like, how long did you have Lyme disease? How long were you sick before you realized you had Lyme disease? All that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh, I was sick in probably junior high school. I remember just probably the sugar addiction started in junior high school, or even maybe younger than that, because I was exhausted all the time. And, if you present with exhaustion to a physician, the first thing they do is check your iron levels. If you present exhaustion to your functional medicine doctor, the first thing they check is your adrenal and thyroid, which is great. But if you have Lyme disease, it's all of that. And then bacteria, virus, mycotoxin, etc. You see where I'm going?
Mm-hmm. So when did you realize that you had Lyme disease?
Let's see. I had it probably since I was, I want to say 9 or 10, and didn't finally get a diagnosis until I was in my mid-40s.
Wow. And how bad did it get?
It was pretty bad. I was non-functional. I mean, there are days I just couldn't get out of bed. I went through 2 pregnancies with Lyme, which was sheer hell because, being pregnant can be already exhausting for some people. It was all I could do to get through each hour of each pregnancy. So I went through many practitioners, naturopaths, holistic practitioners, physicians, massage therapists. And it wasn't until I found someone who really specialized in applied kinesiology or muscle testing. And I recently heard that her nickname is the Lyme Assassin. She was incredible. The first day I got on the table, she muscle tested me. And I said, please, I just don't want any antibiotics. It's the only thing that I don't want. And she muscle tested every kit that she had for everything. And she said, I'm sorry, there are no herbs that are going to touch what's going on with you. And I said, go ahead, go ahead and test the antibiotic kit. And she said, oh my gosh, I found one thing here that your body's absolutely wanting very much. And I said, what is that? And she said, Zithromax. And tears just started streaming down my face, because raising kids, every once in a while I would get upper respiratory things and the doctor would put me on Zithromax. And I didn't like to go on it, but sometimes it would get so bad I had to. And I remember being on Zithromax, and within 24 hours, I had normal energy. I just remember never wanting to get off of it because I felt normal for the first time in my life. So The tears came because I trusted her at that point, because I had already known on some level. I wasn't consciously aware of why I was responding to it. And then I was on Zithromax for 5 to 6 months every day before we really got a hold of the bacteria. And then it still took another 2.5 years of unraveling. Oh my gosh, the myriad of viruses and different bacteria and parasites and detox that needed to happen. So it's quite the journey.
So I don't know if you still call yourself a Lyme coach. Have you changed that title, or are you still using it?
I still call myself a transformational Lyme disease coach.
Okay, so if someone is working with you and they have Lyme disease, like you found your at least first step to like a big move towards progress with the antibiotic. Like what is the process when you're working with a new client to identify what that thing is for them, or do you have a different focus, or what happens there?
Yeah, I have a different focus. So initially I would muscle test clients using test kits from Dr. Klinghardt and using some of his protocols. And what I started to witness happening was clients weren't following through with their protocols, so they weren't getting results. So I started taking a sit back and let's see approach, and I started just listening to what was going on with clients. And I realized what they really wanted to talk about was the trauma and anxiety in their life and their relationships with their family and well, mainly their family. And what I started to see was that once I started doing therapy with them around unraveling their trauma growing up and started working on communication skills and being able to express themselves and set healthy boundaries, once they felt safe mentally and emotionally and how to navigate a world with very unsafe family members, then they were more committed to following through with a physical protocol. So at this point, I don't work with people at the beginning stages of their Lyme disease on the physical level. I work with people who are 3/4 of the way there, who already have a handle on a lot of what it means to heal from Lyme disease. They've done all the running around from one doctor to the other, and they've found an alternative practitioner that's getting them pretty far along. You know, most of the people come to me at this point are 70% there, and they come to me for healing the mental, emotional, the unraveling the familial and ancestral trauma that goes with the wounding that allows this disease to come in on that level. So a lot of it at that point, again, is communication skills, grounding, and empowerment modalities and techniques.
So it seems like...
So in other words, you know, I see Lyme disease as it's a perverse way of people hiding out when they feel too wounded and don't know how to function in the world. It's a cocoon. And so once I empower them with the tools to understand themselves better, and they feel safer in the world, then they're more inclined to come out of their cocoon. It's also a disease. It's a spiritual initiation. It's a disease of sovereignty. I can tell Lyme clients exactly what they need to do to heal. But my biggest challenge with almost every single one of them is helping them to stop giving their power away externally to a paradigm that no longer works for them. And that's the biggest challenge that I have with everyone that I work with. So they would rather listen to what the doctor says regarding a protocol versus what their body is actually telling them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm wondering how you would get someone to like overcome that tendency.
Yeah, that's probably my specialty and my forte. I enjoy that piece, and it's very tedious, and it's a lot of holding space and planting seeds and pushing them along ever so gently for them to come to that own conclusion in their own terms, in their own time. I have to really respect their journey and where they're at. Some people come to it quicker than others. I just had someone recently who took a very long time to realize this. I'm not sure that she actually has. And, you know, parents were both physicians, and she is also a physician. And letting go of giving your power away to the authority figures all around you is a huge paradigm shift, and it causes a huge spiritual awakening. And it's a tremendously healing journey if one can view it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. So just I'm going to do a big summarize here. So basically, it's a virus. It's a bacteria, which we suspect was not natural, and it basically has very little effect unless someone has other health issues going on, like environmental type situations or stuff like that. But once it gets in there and it starts causing serious problems, that someone starts going downhill, and maybe this starts to make their personal life maybe not run as smoothly. And then that gets to a point where that's even too emotional, and their only way of coping with that is this excuse of, I'm too sick, I can't deal with this, leave me alone, I'm going to stay in my room and be in my bed. And, in order to heal themselves, they have to actually want to heal themselves. And that means they have to no longer need the crutch of being a sick person. And that's what you help people with kind of overcoming.
Yeah, they are legit sick. I mean, they are sick as a dog, and it's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of going from one doctor to the other to the other. It's literally they're not getting answers sometimes even from the Lyme doctors they go to. There is no one size fits all treatment protocol for this disease, which people really have to understand, and it's very insidious.
Mm-hmm. But you mentioned that basically, even when someone does have a good protocol, which would likely help them, that they don't actually follow through with it, because it's almost like they want to keep the crutch of being a sick person.
Yeah, what happens is, the Lyme triggers and plays on one's on woundedness growing up, and manifests into, they become victims. They feel pretty victimized most of their life as a child growing up. And then this disease comes in and feeds even more of that feeling like a victim. And what happens then literally is there's just their nervous system, their neural pathways become habituated to identifying with their disease, and they literally don't know who they are without their disease. And I could say that I experienced that absolutely. I didn't know who I was without that disease. And one of the frustrating parts was I spent years trying to educate myself and friends and family around me what Lyme disease was like, and trying to help them understand and make it feel like it was even legit, because I looked okay. I could semi-function, so people could never understand how I could be so ill. That's another huge frustration for people with Lyme. Mm-hmm. And I forget where I was going with that.
Well,
it's really the identifying with disease. And then when I started to tell people I was getting better, they could only see me as someone with Lyme disease. So there was this whole having to step out of this identification with Lyme by friends and family around me. And it's just really a nasty, complex, very frustrating process to have to go through.
Do you think it's something that can be completely recovered from?
I do believe that, yeah. And a lot of people don't. There's a lot of people who say you can never recover from Lyme disease. Absolutely, you can.
So I'm a little, I guess I'm just going to go into the part where, you may not be able to put this on YouTube. You mentioned that, I mean, this seems like it's a pretty powerful microbe.
Yep.
And it seems to have very specific modes of acting.
Absolutely.
And yet at the same time, you say that you believe it to be man-made, intentionally man-made. And I want to hear more about that, and more specifically, like, what do you think is the motive? What is the goal of generating things like this and other similar things?
Well, the goal is always, I didn't want to believe it, but it's absolutely depopulation and enslavement. It's a lot easier to enslave a population when they're sick, they don't feel good, they don't know what's happening to them. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't start out believing any of this. It was just, I was on my own. I was living in a small mountain town. There were no Lyme practitioners near me. So whenever I had the energy, I was online all the time researching, and I started stumbling across different pieces of information that were alluding to these things. And frankly, they were the only things that were starting to make sense. And I just followed the breadcrumbs and started connecting the dots. And I think it's pretty common knowledge amongst the Lyme community that this is what's going on. To varying degrees, to anyone who's come out the other side. I don't think you can come out the other side of this disease and really heal and not have gone down that particular rabbit hole.
Man, it's kind of discouraging, to know there's people out there who are doing these types of stuff and they've been doing it for a long time. But on the other hand, I mean, you talked about earlier, if someone maintains their health, you can be basically invulnerable to these types of things. So,
well, not only your health, I mean, if you come out the other side, you're sovereign. You no longer give your power away to everything outside of you. You go inside of yourself for information. I mean, this is just a beautiful spiritual initiation and opportunity to connect with source, to connect with your higher self, to connect with your Christed self and understand what's really going on. This is liberation. It's a gift.
Yeah, it's like you had to go to the deepest depths of like this hell state. It's just like, I can't do anything. Everything I do is miserable. And it's like, there's nothing that's going to get you out of there except, you taking a hold of your power and doing everything you can despite feeling horrible to solve the problem. And when I could see how, if coming out of that after making that commitment and really committing to that, I could see how you would feel, it would be. It's like an initiation. It's an empowerment.
It's an incredibly dark night of the soul that for many feels like it just never ends because there's so many levels to it. I mean, you get on top of one level and then there's another level. I think what I've been wanting to share too is most of my clients, I would say, are between their 40 and 60s. And the conclusion I've come into after years of working with them is that I'll always ask, when were you diagnosed? How long do you think you've had it? And I would say it averages between 3 to 5 years. But as I track their history and we look back on their intake, I would say they probably have had it from a very young age and probably came in with actually a fairly healthy constitution. And it didn't really manifest until the toxins accumulated, and or more than ever, I think I see it probably either chronic stress or a very traumatic emotional issue is the driver behind it finally expressing itself. Or the soul essence of the person just can't go on living like they're living, so this disease will express itself as a way for them to really step into and do some shadow work like they've never done before, so they can get to the bottom of it. You can't get through this disease and really heal without doing your shadow work. It just, it really doesn't work like that. And then, there is no one size fits all. And there's all often the comparison made to cancer. Cancer, you do chemo or this or that, or even do alternative. And at least there's alternative protocols. There are alternative protocols for Lyme, but cancer is more legitimized in the allopathic world, and it's easier to explain, and people have a better understanding of it, or so they think, or so we've been brainwashed to believe.
So it sounds like getting over Lyme is kind of a multi-faceted, multi-step process. But if someone's right now listening and they're like, I feel kind of crappy, I did live in a moldy place, some of this is resonating with me, and they're like, well, where should I look? Like, do you recommend they go and find someone who is kind of a doctor who specializes in Lyme? And if so, how do they know if it's a good doctor? And at what point should they start looking into the services you offer and that type of stuff?
Yeah. Well, they can immediately have the IGeneX test taken. But, you can also have it. It can be inconclusive. And the longer you've had Lyme, the harder it is to show up on those tests. I'd also make sure you are tested for mold, both of those things at the same time. So you want to interview a variety of different doctors. I just had a client who just went through some of the best in the Bay Area, and she got nowhere with any of them. And she's actually found someone in Boulder who's actually helping her out. So take your time, interview the doctor, get the IGeneX, tell them you want mold testing and IGeneX testing, and really interview the physician. Make sure that there's a rapport there. Make sure they're open to listening to you, as well as just doing the blood work and the testing.
Would you say they should start with just going to like a normal family doctor type, or should they be looking for? Okay.
No, they need to be looking for a Lyme literate doctor, ideally a Lyme literate integrative specialist.
Okay. All right. And then, so like, what would be some warning signs of a doctor they should move on from?
If they don't get, I see clients just like people who go to psychotherapists. They use the same psychotherapist for 10 years or even 5 years, and I just gasp. Same with a physician. If they're not getting results after being on a protocol for 2 weeks max, it's time to either change the protocol or change your physician. When she used the muscle testing and I went on the Zithromax, my results were immediate. In fact, every time she put me on a protocol for the next 2.5 years, except maybe once or twice where I had to tweak the dosage just ever so slightly, I felt great immediately. So if you're taking a protocol and you're feeling lousy and your physician, even your Lyme literate doctor, keeps telling you to push through it and take it anyway, you probably want to reconsider and find somebody else.
Okay. And then how will someone know when it's time to focus on the things that you maybe can help them with?
Once they've stabilized physically, their brain fog has been reduced, their inflammation is reduced, and they just start becoming aware of the trauma in their life. Any good Lyme literate physician is going to understand the trauma, the emotional mental trauma piece. And while they don't specialize in it themselves, they will refer them to someone who will. That's another sign of a good Lyme literate physician. Dr. Klinghardt also has a list of ART or autonomic response. Yeah, I forget what the T is for, technique. Or he used to have a list of practitioners throughout the U.S. That you could check out. I don't know that he has that anymore, but Dr. Klinghardt's an excellent reference. I would be watching all of his YouTubes and looking for practitioners through him.
So it sounds like that would probably be, for me, if it were me and I was wondering, then, just kind of binging on informative videos and podcasts and stuff about Lyme disease. So, and Dr. Klinghardt, how do you spell his last name?
It's Kling, and I believe it's Hardt or ART.
Okay.
And he's German. You'll recognize his accent. He's wonderful. He's really pioneered a lot of cutting edge treatments. Okay. And he's the best out there, in my humble opinion.
Cool. All right. And when people are ready to get in touch with you, where do you recommend they go?
They can go to leilasun.com, and I have a Lyme Academy for Empaths. It's a 4-month program where we get to the bottom of everything that we just spoke about here today, and I can help you out there. You just sign up for a discovery session, and what I'll do is get on the phone and have a free anywhere from 20 to 30 minute talk about what's going on with you and what you're looking for, and just to see if we're a good fit.
Cool. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on and chatting with me about Lyme disease. I'm sure it'll be helpful to many people.
Thank you, Cahlen. Thanks for all the work that you do.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Okay.